Bob Sanborn with Children at Risk, and today we're interviewing Mike Morath, the Commissioner of the Texas Education Agency. Commissioner Morath, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's great to see you.
Nice to see you. So, we just finished our school rankings across the state of Texas, and some interesting stuff. One of the really interesting things to me is that especially as we've been doing this for 20 years, what we notice is that schools have, for the most part, bounced back after the pandemic, even without sort of proper funding for a couple legislative sessions. We still see these schools that serve low-income kids are sort of going in the right direction. It's sort of the bright news. I mean, there's some other news as well, but there's some pretty good news is that in that there are more schools doing better, especially those that serve low-income kids. What do you attribute that to? And are you're seeing the same things with the TEA ratings as well?
Well, I mean, I'd like to think that it means that the investments that the legislature has made that are strategic plan at the agency that these things are working. At its core, accountability is back. So A through F ratings were turned off via lawsuits for 2 years, turned off by the legislature for 2 years, and then sort of forcibly turned off by COVID for 1 year even before that. And the we get 20 years worth of data that tells us accountability systems cause improvements in learning outcomes. So it is it is not an illogical leap to say turning off accountability systems causes declines in student outcomes. So they're back, and that it's clear that we've got a lot of hardworking educators around the system that are taking steps to make it work. But it, as useful a tool as A through F ratings are and as accountability systems are, that doesn't actually tell you this is how to teach reading, this is how to
Right.
teach math. And so, our organization working with the legislature, working with a bunch of skilled practitioners from around the state, has been very intentional in identifying the practices that we see in the highest performing high poverty campuses and codify those practices and then spread the gospel on those practices. So Texas has something called the Effective Schools Framework. I don't know if you've delved into it in detail, but it's not a measurement of your outcomes. It's actually these are the managerial actions that are necessary to be taken at campuses that, if taken and executed well, cause better results. And anyways, it seems to us that this is working. There's an increased knowledge level among our practitioners of the most evidence-based practices managerially to take. There's accountability for getting outcomes. There are many legislative funding streams tied to the most evidence-based practices, and it's beginning to work. It's a big system. There's 9,000
Yeah.
campuses, 1,200 independent school systems. So there's going to be, hits and misses on that, but it's starting to move in the right direction, which is very exciting to see.
you know, Still, even with the proof that we show that accountability seems to work, and certainly we're able to measure that things are working in the right, moving, at least moving in the right direction. It's still very unpopular. There's still groups of parents that don't like accountability. As you know, there are plenty of superintendents that hate accountability, and there are many on both sides of the political aisle that don't like accountability. And even when we try to say, look at what's happening, there are still some districts that don't seem to sort of be getting it, right? There's still inequity in terms of performance. And you look at the valley, the Rio Grande Valley, which is probably the poorest area in our state. It does extraordinarily well, right? There are things that we see going right. West Texas and El Paso doing pretty well. Urban Houston, urban Dallas doing well. And then other places like Fort Worth and San Antonio that aren't doing well. What do you attribute sort of the inconsistency across the state to?
It's a good question. It's hard to identify root cause, but I have traveled everywhere. What I will say is down in the valley, you have a high level of beliefs in adults, in these are valid, reliable measures. My job is to get better results for kids. And you never hear anybody saying this is like I could get better results with those kids. Everybody says, no, 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 no. I can see what practices are better. We're going to execute these practices. And there's just a belief system that if we get our act together, then yes, we can deliver results for kids, regardless. And that ethos, you kind of have to start with that belief system. You really
Yeah.
do. If you don't start with a belief system that is grounded in high expectations, nothing else good happens from it. But I'll opine for a minute just on the controversy associated with it because I don't think this is never going to get resolved. And I'm not just commissioner of education, I'm also a client, right? I'm a dad with 4 kids. My oldest is in seventh. My twins are currently in second grade. When my twins started in kindergarten, we were very intentional about the public school that we enrolled in here in the Austin area. And it was a very rigorous, it is a very continues to be a very rigorous public school. And they brought home assignments within the first 6 weeks where at the kindergarten level, my the assignment was marked as like 62, which is of course failing. And I just want to sort of use this as a vignette of why the this controversy on accountability is just never going to go away. Because let's just talk about the differences in the Morath household when that happened. My wife is looking at the growth of our little bundles of joy, and she wants them to be excited and motivated. And she turns to me with this paper in her hand, and she's like, "The kids are 5. This is kindergarten. What the heck?" In commenting on them bringing home a failing grade. And I also want my kids to be excited and love and grow as humans, have a growth mindset and all this stuff. I look at the actual work and I was like, but look at what they did. This is not proficient work. We got to work on it. We gotta help them get stronger. And I think that this is the tension that you have in any academic discipline. Because when you're faced with a situation like that, there's several choices that you can make. You can lie. You can say, "Kid, you're doing just fine. Everything's great. Nothing to see here." You can not grade anything. No feedback at all. This is how the work happened. The fact that the kid's failing, I'm simply never going to tell anybody. You could dumb it down and make the work easier, and therefore the grades get better, or some combination thereof. And sort of ultimately, it comes back to we have to believe that yes, this is appropriate work for kids at this stage of development. It's our job to support them. It's not our job to coddle them and to accept the low levels of performance. It's not our job. We don't want to make them feel bad about it. We want to diffuse the tension. We want to give them points of success. So give them work that is just right work for them that they can feel success at. But ultimately, once they graduate, once they're out of our system, America is a great country, but you have to bring it, right? You have to have these skills. It's very Darwinian, and you have to start with high expectations, and you have to be willing to do the work, but also be willing to motivate and support students to be successful in that environment. And this is the leadership challenge that we have in education.
I hope you also learned that your wife is always right, no matter what. I hope.
She is, by the way. This is very, very, very true. And I don't want to imply that my wife has low expectations. It's just like, what do you do when you are faced
Yeah.
with information that students have not quite reached where we want them to reach?
Yeah. I think, I sometimes I think you and I are the only people who love accountability, but I do feel like it's something that's essential for us to certainly measure where we're going, and certainly we can do much better, I think, right? I mean, when you look across at all our schools, there's still a lot more that could be done. I want to ask you, in our state, we know that about a third of all the students are children of immigrants or immigrants themselves. So there's a pretty large emergent bilingual population. There's certainly a large immigrant population. How do you feel about what's happening in our state in terms of the demonizing of immigrants and how that impacts so many of our kids and so many of our families? Is that something that you guys talk about at the TEA from time to time?
I mean, I don't,
And I know it's
one, I don't know.
sensitive. I know it's a sensitive issue.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with your conclusion about the sort of current state of discourse.
Yeah.
But generally, our job is to educate kids that come to public school, and so everything else is secondary to that. We just need to make sure that we provide quality curriculum, quality learning experiences. If kids come to school and they don't speak English, then our job is to teach them English as quickly as possible. They got to be proficient in our mother tongue. Much beyond that, those are not discussions that we, get involved in.
Yeah. The whole idea of teaching English as soon as possible. Do you get pushback on that ever?
Uh, I mean, not really, but I mean, there's an evidence base related to language acquisition, and so individuals who have growing proficiency of academic content in a given language, if you only then teach them content in a new language, they will slow their proficiency growth of that underlying academic content. So, stated differently, if I needed to learn Spanish and all of my math instruction was in Spanish. I'm not bad in math, but I might start getting worse in math in that context. So there is some, I think, thoughtfulness as to how to structure instruction to as quickly as possible get to English language proficiency while also growing broad academic proficiency in students.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about pre-K. I know that you're a big supporter of high quality early education. And you and I both see the results when there's good high quality, when it's well implemented, high quality early education. We absolutely see results, especially with low income kids at the elementary level. Um, where do you see it really working well across our state? And where are we falling short in regards to pre-K and high quality early education in Texas?
Yeah, I mean the evidence base, there is a ton of research studies on the early childhood educational experiences and their impact on students over time. My quick conclusion from this is that pre-K is not the same thing as the broad dimension of early
Right.
childhood education.
Right.
Um, and uh, so the content that is provided to students in pre-K, one, you have to have the right learning environment. This is a very play-based learning experience in that age range. But it is pre-kindergarten content. And what I mean by that is if the kindergarten content largely looks the same, if I'm learning my letters and my numbers in pre-K, and then I go to kindergarten, I'm also learning my letters and numbers. All we've actually ended up doing is teaching kids to be cynical about school earlier. And that is in fact what the data that comes out of the large scale studies in Tennessee demonstrate is if pre-K is linked to a very, very rigorous elementary school experience, it's amazingly positive. If it is linked to an average or below average elementary school experience, it actually seems to reduce student learning outcomes in even in elementary school, so as early as third and fourth grade. So you gotta make sure elementary education is right first and foremost, and then strengthen it with strong pre-K. But I want to come back to pre-K is not all of what I think of as early childhood education because parents
Right.
are a child's first teacher. Period. Full stop.
Yeah.
And so, in efforts that we do to ensure that we empower and otherwise support parents as the primary, educator of children while they're in the early childhood years, is seemingly more effective than sending them off to somebody else for 6 hours a day. So that should also be part of our sort of our policy supports is just recognizing parents are child's first teacher and supporting them appropriately. And if you go back to sort of the gold standard pre-K research from the 60s and 70s, that's often lost because those programs were not just sending kids to a childcare facility and receiving instruction. They were much more focused on the family and the parent as the child's first teacher through that experience rather than just come to an institutional location and get instruction.
It's almost the best argument that you could have for parental leave, right? This whole idea of parents sort of being those first teachers, right? It's so very,
And coming back to the Morath household, my wife is a doctor. She was practicing doctor, and we
yeah.
had children. She was blessed to be able to stay home with the kids, and it's the best gift that I can imagine.
We're one of only two countries in the world without a federal parental leave policy, us and Papua New Guinea, but I'm sure you knew that. But
That's a little outside of my area of
now you
expertise.
know. So, back to this idea of sort of the inconsistency of pre-K across our state. You and I both see, and we see the districts that are doing it right and the ones that are doing it wrong. You don't have to look very far to see those results. Is there any push from you guys or to really get districts to sort of follow some sort of positive pattern in regards to early education, pre-K, leading into K and through 8 at least?
There are some best practice recommendations, and then the legislature has a kind of a quality framework for practices that are supposed to be in high quality pre-kindergarten environments. But the kinds of supports that exist in pre-K are not nearly as robust as the supports for, say, first grade phonics instruction
Yeah,
from the state.
yeah. We do our gold ribbon ratings, which are basically looking at schools that are over 75% low income, but are getting an A or a B. One of the things that we see in the state of Texas, 65% of all our school kids qualify as low income households. It doesn't mean they're below the poverty level, but they're free and reduced school lunch. When you see that in our state, and that's sort of the growing portion of our school population, are there things that you'd like us to be doing as a state? Maybe we're not there yet, specifically focusing on those low income families
You're talking about practices in the schools.
in the
I may
schools.
have,
In the
yeah.
schools, yeah, yeah,
I mean, again, I think that the practices that we've identified in the highest performing campuses around the state are the practices that are necessary. It's leadership, it's talent, it's supporting student readiness, it's curriculum, it's instruction, and getting all five of those sort of adult systems of the campus firing on all cylinders. That's what you've got to do. And if you do that well, then it's pretty remarkable what can happen because it's not like being born on a bed of money magically teaches you to read. That's not how it works. There are specific learning experiences that kids are exposed to. It's just much more likely that if you happen to have parents of means, that those experiences are provided to you outside of school as well as inside of school.
yeah. And the level of parental educational attainment, right? Which it goes hand in hand with that whole
Well,
idea.
yeah, again, a lot of that is linguistic exposure.
Yeah,
So, how many words are you exposed to? How much sort of how many concepts of the world? How much knowledge of our culture, our history, our literature do you get exposed to in school and outside of school? Because it's the sum total of all those things that are coming in your ears and your eyes at all time that drive your level of literacy.
yeah,
You also have to be taught phonics and handwriting. There's some explicit sort of grammatic syntax stuff that has to be given to you, but like that content environment that you're exposed to. So if you have educated parents, it's somewhat more likely that you're hearing erudite vocabulary at the house. And if not, it's less likely, which means the school has to double down on the quality of content that it provides. It's stated differently. Some kids can go visit the Grand Canyon because the parents have means to take them there. So, but for the kids who can't, our school's got to bring the Grand Canyon to them. That's what has to happen.
yeah. I want to talk super briefly about vouchers because everyone would be surprised if I didn't ask you about this. When I look at the piece of legislation that passed, there were some good things, and if we look at, if I try to stretch and say what good could come of this, there may be some innovations that come out of this that maybe can be used for other practice. It's certainly good for some families. We see it, but I have to think that for the lowest income families, and maybe for some of us, we thought that the ESAs would be perfect for these families. I tend to think we're not going to get much. Not many of those families are really going to use the vouchers. I mean, I know it's sort of outside of the purview of the TEA, but what are your thoughts around that?
Well, I mean, honestly, you're going to have a data point on that in about 6 months. So we can pontificate all we want, but you can just look at how the program's designed and how it works. I think that the way they designed it sort of tilts the the advantage for lower income families to gain access to it. But the essence of this is for parents. Parent has
Yeah.
to want this. If a parent's getting a great experience in their local public school, great. If a parent is not, then here's a tool to try to support the education of their child.
What grade would you give the TEA in terms of moving the needle? Um, and I will just add a little context is that us doing these ratings for 20 years, I remember the first time we did the gold ribbon, which is maybe 18 years ago. There were very few gold ribbon schools. In other words, schools that had over 75% low income kids getting an area B. Most of the A's and B's were going to be magnet schools and more high income suburban districts. That has changed in Texas. During your tenure, we've seen things sort of get better as well. But what grade would you give you guys, Mike?
Oh man, I feel like you just gave me a pretty high grade, so I'll take that. But
You
you
prefer
know
the
I mean it's
non-grade grade.
it is potentially it's useful to talk about what does TEA do. And this is a little bit of a cop out to the answer to your question, but we implement legislation. So we're a creation of the legislature. We provide loose guidelines and guardrails, as it were, for public education writ large, and we rate performance outcomes of schools. It's one of the kind of key duties that we have. So in many ways, you've got independent operators all over the state of Texas doing their own thing. We give them some leadership guidance and support, but otherwise, it's like the buck stops at the local level. You're talking to a former school board member, so the so there's a huge aspect of the work that we do that can only influence. It doesn't have authority. But you happen to live in Houston, so you're also aware of this other sort of use case.
Yeah.
So if you look at our track record of intervention, it's remarkably positive. So you got a whole lot more gold ribbons in Houston today than you did in 2023 pre-intervention. So I would think you could give us pretty strong marks for our management practices with regard to local school systems. And I think broadly, the efforts that we've tried to do is not just focus on accountability. We think that that's important. I think that that's important. But if all you ever talk about is accountability, it's sort of like the
Yeah.
beatings will continue until morale improves sort of environment. It's not. So what we wanted to do is create supports and be an arm of support. Nobody's educated in this building here in Austin. They're educated in schools around the state. So our job is to support leaders and help them be more effective. And so some of the investments that we've tried to do to strengthen our local school superintendents, school boards, principals' capacity to execute, I think has worked. And as you've seen, we've seen improvements on the lower end of we have more high poverty, high performing schools today in Texas than really ever have. So I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
think so.
That seems at least worth a B.
At least a B minus, maybe C plus somewhere.
Yeah, something. Yeah.
I'm just giving you a hard
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Commissioner Mike Morath, thank you very much for what you and all your team are doing each and every day, Mike. And we have seen significant improvement over the years in our schools. You and I both know there's a lot to do, right? Kids are still not up on reading and math levels where they need to be, but we're certainly going in the right direction, which is certainly something. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, happy Thanksgiving and happy holidays.
You
Merry
too.
Christmas. Take care.